The Westland Wyvern was an ambitious British carrier-based strike fighter that tried to combine the speed of a fighter with the firepower of an attack aircraft. Yet its development was plagued by constant redesigns and deadly accidents. Despite these struggles, Westland still managed to produce a combat-ready aircraft, though it came far too late to make any lasting impact. The story begins in 1943 with William Petter, Chief Technical Officer at the Westland Aircraft. He started working on a single-seat, high-performance strike fighter that could carry a heavy payload while maintaining excellent performance. At the time, the Royal Navy was working to bring the Firebrand torpedo fighter into service, but it turned out that the Firebrand was too slow to serve as a fighter. Meanwhile, the latest Seafire lacked the ability to carry any heavy payload. If we take a closer look at the Firebrand, it's not difficult to notice its unimpressive speed. The Firebrand Mark IV, despite being powered by a 2,520 horsepower Bristol Centaurus engine, was still slower than most contemporary Allied naval fighters, including those developed much earlier. Recognizing the need for a more capable strike fighter, Westland proposed the W-34, an aircraft that aimed to replace the Firebrand and address the shortcomings. For power, Westland chose the Rolls-Royce Eagle, the 24-cylinder flat H engine in development at the time. This engine was projected to produce 3,500 horsepower. By 1944, two W-34 configurations were under consideration. One featured a nose-mounted engine, while the other one had a mid-fuselage engine. However, the mid-engine design was quickly abandoned due to its excessive weight and complexity. The nose-mounted engine configuration became the foundation for what would later be known as the Westland Wyvern. In April 1944, the Ministry of Aircraft Production officially selected Westland's W-34 to meet specification N11/44. This specification was calling for a long-range fighter that could operate from both aircraft carriers and shore bases. Like other late-war British fighters, its fixed armament included 4 20mm Hispano cannons. The aircraft was also required to carry up to 3 1,000-pound bombs or one 18-inch torpedo. Although Westland initially pursued the Rolls-Royce Eagle piston engine, they also explored turboprop options early on. But in August 1944, the Ministry of Supply decided that the aircraft should proceed with the Eagle engine for the time being. At this stage, Westland was really optimistic about this aircraft's performance. In early 1944, estimates suggested a top speed of 471 miles per hour. Even more ambitiously, an earlier projection claimed 500 miles per hour. The Royal Air Force had already chosen the de Havilland Hornet and Hawker Fury as their long-range and short-range fighters. However, the RAF still showed some interest in W-34 as a potential long-range fighter bomber, possibly influenced by the speed projection. But reality soon set in. The 480 miles per hour figure was overly optimistic, and when revised estimates revealed the lower performance, it was clear that the Wyvern was notably inferior to the Hornet at nearly all altitudes. With no significant range advantage either, the RAF found no reason to adopt the Wyvern. In hindsight, comparing the Wyvern's estimates to the actual performance of the production Hornet makes it even clearer. The Wyvern was simply not fast enough. With no role in the RAF, the Wyvern was left solely as a Royal Navy project. In September 1944, Petter left Westland, transferred detailed design responsibilities to John Digby. Petter then went on to lead the development of the highly successful English Electric Canberra bomber. Around the same time, the British government placed an order for 6 Wyvern prototypes to begin full-scale development. In February 1945, Westland began constructing the first Wyvern prototype. Meanwhile, Rolls-Royce was designing the first turboprop engine the RB-39 Clyde. This engine was more compact and lighter than the Eagle and had greater future development potential in power. However, Rolls-Royce soon expressed concerns that they might not have the resources to develop both the Eagle and Clyde simultaneously. Later, the real crisis came in October 1945. Under pressure from the Ministry of Supply, Rolls-Royce had to cancel the Eagle engine and focus on the Clyde. Despite this, the Ministry of Supply still approved a small batch of about 30 Eagle engines, just enough to power the 6 prototypes and 20 pre-production Wyverns. These Eagle-powered Wyverns were later known as the Wyvern TF-1, with TF standing for Torpedo Fighter. With a switch to turboprop power, Westland had to redesign the airframe, leading to a new designation, the W-35. Fortunately, early design studies had already explored the feasibility of fitting a turboprop engine onto a TF-1 airframe, which helped accelerate the redesign process. By Christmas 1945, the contract for 3 Clyde-powered Wyvern prototypes under specification N12/45 was finalized and sent to Westland. This aircraft was expected to top 455 miles per hour at 20,000 feet and 435 miles per hour at sea level. The lighter weight and superior low-altitude performance projection made the MOS believe that the Clyde-powered Wyvern was a clear improvement over the TF-1. At this stage, Westland and the MOS still believed the Clyde would be delivered very soon. Reality proved otherwise. Although the Clyde had made its first run in August 1945, it was in an early development stage and would not be delivered to Westland until 1948. As Clyde development continued to face delays in 1946, the Ministry of Supply took action in May, instructing Westland to use the Armstrong-Siddeley Python turboprop engine instead. But this did very little to solve the problem. Just like the Clyde, the Python was also in early stages of development and would not be available anytime soon. With no available turboprop engines, Westland had no choice but to continue testing with the Eagle-powered Wyverns. These tests were useful in gathering basic aerodynamic data and understanding the aircraft's handling characteristics. However, it was clear that the Wyvern's true potential depended on the successful integration of a reliable turboprop engine. With those delays, the Wyvern's development timeline was already slipping behind schedule, setting the stage for further struggles in the years to come. By December 1946, the first Eagle-powered Wyvern prototype, TS-371, took its maiden flight. Its first flight was successful, but later flights revealed handling issues that had to be addressed before the Wyvern could be cleared for service. A second prototype, TS-375, followed in September 1947. However, the first prototype crashed the following month due to a propeller bearing failure, killing the test pilot Peter Garner. After this accident, the second prototype was fitted with an ML ejection seat and a 10-degree dihedral tailplane to improve flight safety and handling. During early trials, the TF-1 exhibited multiple handling deficiencies, particularly in directional stability, yaw control, and rudder effectiveness. Pilots found that directional trimming was extremely difficult, and the aircraft was impossible to fly without side slip. One of the most serious issues was rudder lock. So imagine you are the pilot, applying foot pressure to deflect the rudder. Under normal circumstances, as rudder moves, the aerodynamic force increases, requiring greater effort to maintain control. However, in the Wyvern's case, during flat turns within a certain speed range, pilots discovered that once the rudder passed about half travel, the force required to deflect it suddenly became lighter. At first, this might sound like a useful feature, but it was actually a serious flaw. What was happening was that the aerodynamic forces acting on the rudder overpowered a control input, unintentionally compensating for the force that should have been applied by the pilot. If the pilot released pressure on the rudder pedal at this point, the rudder would not return to neutral. Instead, it would remain stuck in a deflected position, making it difficult to regain control. In many cases, pilots had to apply significant force to unlock the rudder. Apart from rudder issues, the Wyvern also had problems with its ailerons. Pilots noted a tendency for the ailerons to upfloat, which appeared to contribute to premature stalls. TF1s also displayed poor carrier landing characteristics. For improvement, several modifications were made. The aileron spring tab rate was reduced, the outboard wing leading edge was reshaped to a more rounded profile. Additionally, the port-geared balance tab on the elevator was replaced with a spring tab unit, which improved pitch control. The results were encouraging. Pilots reported that deck landing characteristics were now much improved. With the excellent visibility, the landing performance was considered to be very good. However, one major problem remained: the takeoff performance. Despite the modifications, the Wyvern still struggled to get airborne. The aircraft's excessive weight and high wing loading made takeoff difficult, particularly when carrying a full combat load. Ultimately, the Wyvern TF1 never entered operational service. All 13 built TF1s were used exclusively for testing and evaluation until the early 1950s. Today, only one Wyvern TF1 survives, the VR-137. It is also the sole surviving Wyvern of any variant and is preserved at the Fleet Air Arm Museum in England. While the TF1 prototypes continued their trials, Westland was simultaneously developing turboprop-powered Wyverns. Both the Rolls-Royce Clyde and Armstrong Siddeley Python engines were not ready until 1948. Due to its more compact design, the Clyde required only minor modifications to the Wyvern's airframe, making it the first turboprop-powered Wyvern to be completed. The Clyde-powered VP-120 took its maiden flight in January 1949, but the test ended in near disaster. Shortly after takeoff, the cockpit filled with thick smoke, forcing test pilot Harold Penrose to execute an emergency landing. Despite the setback, once a new engine was fitted, VP-120 resumed flight tests and gained popularity among test pilots. It was described as group performer. The Ministry of Supply was so impressed that they placed an order for 100 Clyde engines to power the future production Wyverns. But then, a devastating blow, Rolls-Royce declined the order and abandoned the Clyde project entirely. Lord Hives, chairman of Rolls-Royce, believed that the Avon jet engine would become the Merlin of the jet age and that the Clyde had no future. With Clyde production terminated, the only viable engine left for Wyvern was the Python. Even after the cancellation, VP-120 continued test flights until April 1950. It was then transferred to Napier to be fitted with a Nomad turbo compound engine. However, the fit never happened, and the Nomad project was also abandoned due to its complexity. In 1952, VP-120 was used in safety barrier trials aboard the aircraft carrier HMC Eagle and was nearly destroyed in the process. Its last reported appearance was in March 1953, when it was subjected to a rocket blast test. It was presumably scrapped shortly thereafter, marking the end of the Clyde-powered Wyvern. The first Python-powered Wyvern, VP-109, flew in March 1949, but its development was anything but smooth. The Python engine posed significant installation challenges, delaying VP-109's first flight. Test pilot Mike Graves, who had previously flown both the Eagle-powered TF1 and the Clyde-powered VP-120, found that the Python throttle response and tendency to surge far worse than those of the Clyde. The second Python-powered Wyvern, VP-113, took flight in August 1949. These two Python-powered prototypes revealed many issues. The rudder lock problem from the TF1 persisted. Overall stability was worse than the TF1, which was likely due to the more rearward center of gravity, and the rolling performance was poor, with excessively heavy aileron controls. Then, in October 1949, tragedy struck. During a demonstration flight, VP113's Python engine flamed out mid-air. Mike Graves attempted to land normally instead of executing a belly landing, possibly trying to save the aircraft. However, he overshot the runway and crashed into a house. The accident was catastrophic, killing Graves and several civilians. Despite these setbacks, Westland pressed on. From February 1950, a series of tests were conducted using pre-production Python-powered Wyvern TF2s. The TF2 continued to suffer from several aerodynamic and engine problems, preventing it from being cleared for service. To address those issues, several modifications were made. Small air brakes were added, necessitating the installation of boundary layer fences on the wings to prevent aileron twitch when the air brakes were deployed. A taller fin with horn-balanced rudder was added to improve yaw control. One prototype, VWA65, tested an experimental dorsal fin, which significantly enhanced lateral and directional stability, making it the most stable Wyvern ever tested at the Aeroplane and Iron Experimental Establishment. The dorsal fin modification successfully alleviated rudder lock, making it occur only in extreme flat turns with excessive side slip, a scenario very unlikely to happen in normal operations. Despite the effectiveness, Westland ultimately rejected the idea, which was likely due to manufacturing concerns. Instead, they fitted two auxiliary fins to the tailplane, which was deemed a more practical solution. The modifications seemed to be making progress, but then, in June 1951, another deadly accident occurred. During a test flight, the prototype VWA69 suffered a catastrophic propeller failure. The contra-rotating propellers meshed together during a violent yaw, causing the entire engine to detach from the aircraft. Test pilot D.K. Hansen activated the ML ejection seat, but tragically, he was unable to escape in time. He was killed in the crash. Following this accident, all Wyverns were grounded until they were retrofitted with the new Martin Baker ejection seats. Time came to 1952. The Python-powered Wyvern had evolved into its final form, the Wyvern S4. The S stood for strike, as by this point the aircraft was no longer intended to perform as fighter roles. With the addition of tailplane fins and improved rudder control, the S4 was finally considered stable enough for carrier operations. Some other minor changes were also implemented. The leading edge of the annular air intake was cut back to facilitate the loading of engine starter cartridges. The one-piece stiffened canopy was replaced with a metal-framed unit after several in-flight canopy collapses. However, even at this stage, engine problems persisted, and further modifications were necessary before the Wyvern could enter full service. Changes continued. Both Armstrong Siddeley and Rotork, the airscrew manufacturer, worked tirelessly to resolve the slow throttle response and engine surge issues. From 1950 to 1952, multiple engine control units were tested, but reliability issues persisted. After 9 years of development, the Wyvern was still not fully ready for carrier service. But to make use of this aircraft, the Royal Navy deployed Wyverns in limited service from shore stations in 1953. Finally, in September 1954, with fully modified Python 3 engines incorporating the definitive Rotork engine control unit, the No. 813 Squadron finally began carrier operations aboard HMS Albion. But the Python engine never ceased to disappoint. Fuel starvation and flamers were frequent during early high-G catapult launches. the aircraft's service life was short. By 1958, all Wyverns were officially retired, bringing an end to one of Britain's most troubled naval fighter programs. In total, only 124 Wyverns were ever completed, including both operational aircraft and prototypes. Beyond the versions discussed in the video, the Wyvern story doesn't end there. Several additional variants and concepts were explored. One such variant was the Wyvern T Mark III, a sole trainer version, equipped with a Python engine. The only prototype took to the skies in February 1950. However, just a month later, the Royal Navy concluded that there was no need for a two-seat Wyvern, and the project was then cancelled. There were also ambitious design proposals that never materialized. One such concept was the Wyvern Mark V. Envisioned in March 1954, it was designed to be powered by the Napier double-elan turboprop engine, which was expected to offer superior speed and payload capacity compared with the Wyvern S4. However, it never progressed beyond the design stage. Even earlier, as far back as 1946, jet-powered Wyvern concepts were under consideration. These were designated the W36 and were proposed with Rolls-Royce AJ65 and Metrovic F9 jet engines. But just like the Mark V, they remained on paper and were ultimately abandoned. So this is the development of the Westland Wyvern. In the next video, I will cover the Wyvern's design and performance, compare it with some of the best propeller-driven fighters of its time, and see if it actually achieved Westland's initial goal of building an excellent strike fighter. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more aviation history. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.